Hey guys, how's it going? Master Cal here, and today I'm going to be doing the 11th video for my 2021 NFL offseason recap series, the New York Giants. So this is a make or break year for Giants quarterback Daniel Jones, and so GM Dave Gettleman made it a point to upgrade his skill cast and also add a few more reinforcements to a defense that had a really strong season last year, but despite some weak points, especially at pass rush and a number 2 corner. So the Giants did not have any coaching changes this offseason. Joe Judge in his second year as head coach. Jason Garrett is back as the offensive coordinator. There were some calls to fire Garrett during the season, but that was before the Giants went on a hot streak towards the end of the year that nearly culminated in them getting a playoff spot, if only for the Eagles not intentionally trying to lose the game that would have given over Washington, that would have given the Giants that division win. But whatever. And Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, after the work he did with that defense, so he did receive interest as a head coaching candidate. I know the Jets were among one of the teams interested, but ultimately he signed an extension to stay with the Giants and was also named the assistant head coach. So I wouldn't be surprised for him to get more opportunities sometime later down the line. So on to the free agents that the Giants retained. Their biggest one was defensive end Leonard Williams, who they had acquired during the 2019 season from their crosstown rival Jets. They franchise tagged him for the second straight season before signing him to a 3-year contract worth $63 million, $45 million of it guaranteed. Williams had a true breakout season for the Giants last year under the tag, as he had double-digit sacks for the first time in his career. He'd always been a guy that put up a lot of pressures, but didn't really turn into sacks. Although his 2019 season wasn't that great, neither was 2018 with the Jets. But 2020 with the Giants was outstanding, and now they've locked him up for the next few years. Defensive tackle Austin Johnson, who was one of their free agent signings last offseason, was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $3 million with $1.5 million guaranteed. Long snapper Casey Kreider was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million, $337,500 guaranteed. Linebacker Devontae Downs was non-tendered as a restricted free agent, but re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.02 million with $75,000 guaranteed. He was the starter at middle linebacker to open the year after the injured David Mayo, but he would lose the starting job to Tay Crowder, and he's likely a backup again this year. Wide receiver C.J. Board, who's a special teamer, was brought back as a restricted free agent on a 1-year deal worth $1.02 million with $50,000 guaranteed. Tackle Jackson Barton was re-signed as an exclusive rights free agent to a 1-year deal worth $850,000. Cornerback Madre Harper was brought back as an exclusive rights free agent to a 1-year deal worth $780,000. Receiver David Sills, who missed all of last year due to injury, was brought back as an exclusive Reds free agent on a 1-year deal worth $660,000. And running back Sandro Platzgummer, who was on their practice squad last year, is brought back on a 1-year deal worth $660,000 as well. For their free agent signings, Kenny Golladay, the former Lions receiver, was signed to a 4-year deal worth $72 million with $28 million guaranteed after the Lions decided not to franchise tag him. Golladay is coming off of a down year, which is mostly attributed to injury. He missed a lot of time due to injury, but he was outstanding in 2018 and 2019, so the Giants will be banking on that form of Golladay. And this was actually a weaker free agent market for receivers. You saw Juju Smith-Schuster settle for a 1-year deal, and then you saw Corey Davis and Curtis Samuel get deals in like the $11, $12, $13 million range. But Golladay blew that open with an $18 million per year contract. And he gives the Giants a legit number 1 receiver, which they haven't had since they traded OBJ to the Browns in 2019. They signed former Tennessee Titans first-round corner Adoree Jackson to a 3-year deal worth $39 million, $24.5 million guaranteed. He was released by Tennessee this offseason before his 5th-year option became fully guaranteed in the final year of when 5th-year options were guaranteed for injury only. Jackson missed, I believe, all of last season, if not all, pretty much almost all, because of injury. But he's been a pretty productive corner when he's been healthy, and so the Giants will be hoping for something similar with Jackson, like with Golladay. Track record, but was injured last year. Kind of another signing on kind of similar lines. They signed former longtime Vikings tight end Kyle Rudolph to a 2-year deal worth $12 million, $4.5 million guaranteed. He was released by Minnesota this offseason, partially for cap, partially because he had a down year. Injuries may have impacted the down year, but the Giants or the Vikings did kind of seem to phase him out of the offense, with Irv Smith Jr. being more of the pass-catching tight end and Rudolph relegated to a more blocking role. And Rudolph will be the number 2 tight end for the Giants, at least for now. They signed former Raiders and Broncos running back Devontae Booker to a 2-year deal worth $5.5 million, up to $6 million, with $2 million of it guaranteed. They signed him as insurance because of the Saquon Barkley injury, obviously coming off a torn ACL. Barkley is currently on the PUP list to start camp. He can be activated before training camp is over, and then he would be ready for the start of the season, but Booker is insurance just in case. They signed edge rusher Ifeadi Odenigbo to a 1-year deal worth $2.5 million with $1 million guaranteed. Minnesota non-tendered him as a restricted free agent. He had a pretty solid 2019 season, but was a non-factor last year in 2020. They added former Bengals top 10 pick John Ross on a 1-year deal worth $2.25 million with $1 million guaranteed. Ross has been a bust at the MLB level as he has failed to live up to expectations. He's struggled with injuries. He has had some good games and has flashed some potential during his time there, but he's just been buried down depth charts and hasn't been super impressive to warrant a whole ton of playing time, and he'll have to fight for a role with the Giants in camp this year. They added journeyman backup quarterback Mike Glennon on a 1-year deal worth $1.375 million, $450,000 of it guaranteed. Glennon started a few games for the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, and he's pretty decent as a backup. Daniel Jones has missed time in both his rookie and sophomore seasons due to injury, so Glennon is a nice insurance policy if Jones has to miss any time this season as well. They signed guard Zach Fulton, former Chief and Texan, to a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million, $137,500 guaranteed, and he was released by the Houston Texans this offseason. Fulton is known more for his pass protection, which is okay-ish, than his run blocking, which is really bad. And he can play center as well, which gives which allows him to be a backup center, and he's going to compete for the starting right guard spot. They signed former first-round pick Danny Shelton to a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million, and they guaranteed a decent chunk of that, $987,500. He's played for the Browns, the Patriots, and spent last year with the Lions. He was released by Detroit this offseason, so Giants going after a lot of players that were released after having played for Matt Patricia with the Patriots and going over to the Lions. Patrick Graham does have some experience in the Patriots system, so Shelton is kind of a system fit, and we'll see what he does on the Giants line. They signed linebacker Reggie Ragland, another former Lion, also former Chief and Bill, to a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million, $137,500 guaranteed. He started a decent amount of games over his years, including starting in the Chiefs Super Bowl victory a couple of years ago, so he's got experience there, and he's a good special teamer and depth piece. They signed edge rusher Ryan Anderson to a 1-year deal, minimum salary $137,500 guaranteed. Spent the last 4 years with the division rival Washington football team. Anderson had a had a mini breakout year in 2019 where he had some sacks and forced some fumbles as well, but with the scheme change from the 3-4 to the 4-3, Anderson wasn't a scheme fit in Ron Rivera's defense last year, and with their additions like Chase Young and whatnot, a healthier year out of Montez Sweat, Anderson didn't really play a whole lot last year, and so now he'll go back to a 3-4 system with the Giants and hope to bolster that pass rush. And then a bunch of their smaller signings: cornerback Chris Milton, former Titan, 1 year, $990,000, nothing guaranteed. Former Eagles running back Corey Clement, 1 year, $990,000. This is actually kind of an interesting one. They signed Kelvin Benjamin, former first-round pick of the Carolina Panthers, to a 1-year deal worth $990,000. We haven't heard anything from him since he was released by the Kansas City Chiefs during the 2018 season. And he's actually going to be converting to tight end. He has the body to do that, and Dave Gettleman drafted him when he was with Carolina, so I guess we'll see, and he can have a shot at competing for the number 3 tight end role. Safety Joshua Kalu, another former Titan, signed a 1-year deal worth $920,000. Fullback Colin Gillespie signed a 1-year deal worth $850,000. Nothing of that guaranteed. He was waived by the Texans last year coming off of an injury, and he'll compete against Elijah Penny for the fullback role. Tight end Cole Hicatini signed a 1-year deal worth $780,000. They brought back special teamer Joe Webb, but he has since been cut. And when they added Raquel Armstead via waivers from the Jacksonville Jaguars, he missed all of last year because of a condition developed after contracting COVID-19, but they have since cut Armstead. So now on to the Giants' cuts. They released starting right guard Kevin Zeitler, and that was a move that the Giants only had to make out of necessity because they needed cap space to franchise tag Leonard Williams, so they had to decide keep one of their best offensive linemen or keep a breakout pass rusher, and they opted for the pass rusher, and they released Zeitler. They tried to extend him and lower his cap hit, but they couldn't agree to terms, and Zeitler later signed a 3-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens. They cut wide receiver Golden Tate, who winds up being a failed free agent signing a couple of years ago. He was a non-factor with the Giants. He was suspended. He was injured. Didn't really do that much, and a far cry from what he was a few years ago with the Seahawks and the Lions. Linebacker David Mayo, who was a nice find for them in 2019, but wasn't as great in 2020 and was also hurt. He signed with the Washington football team, reunited with Ron Rivera as a former Panther. Receiver Cody Core, a special teamer, he missed all of last year due to injury. They waived running back Devontae Freeman from IR. He signed under the Buffalo Bills practice squad for their playoff run, but the Bills opted not to bring him back after their season ended, and he remains unsigned. And then some of their smaller cuts: cornerback Ryan Lewis, receiver Demary Scott, and then DB Shaquille Taylor, who got claimed by the Philadelphia Eagles off of waivers. He's got connections to the coaching staff there from his days with the Indianapolis Colts. For their free agent losses, nose tackle Dalvin Tomlinson signed a 2-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. The Giants were kind of in a tough spot with both Williams and Tomlinson free agents, and they could only bring back one, so they opted for Williams. And Tomlinson, one of the better run defenders in the game, is now gone. Tackle Cameron Fleming, who started at right tackle for them last year, signed with the Denver Broncos as he was not very good as a starter. Backup quarterback Colt McCoy signed a 1-year deal with the Cardinals. McCoy actually started and beat the Seahawks last year with Jones injured, so that was interesting. Edge rusher Kyler Fackrell signed a 1-year deal with the LA Chargers. Safety Adrian Colbert signed with the New England Patriots. Their unsigned free agents are backup center Spencer Pulley, safety special teamer Nate Ebner, running back Dion Lewis, edge rusher Jabal Sheard, and running back Alfred Morris. In Ebner's case, Ebner's going to be playing in these Tokyo Olympics for the rugby. I think it's the rugby team. It could be something else. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's rugby. He is going to be playing in the Olympics, though, and he's expected to re-sign with the Giants as soon as the Olympics are over. As far as notable trades go, Dave Gettleman traded back in the draft for at least the first round for the first time ever. He traded back with the Chicago Bears as he acquired future first and fourth rounders from the Bears. So now the Giants have a couple first rounders in next year's draft, which could be important if they want to move up for a quarterback if Daniel Jones doesn't pan out this year, as the Bears move up to select Justin Fields. And so onto those draft picks. With the Giants trading back from number 11 to the Bears number 20, they took University of Florida receiver Kadarius Toney with that pick. Toney was a guy whose stock blossomed this year during the season and also during the Senior Bowl, a guy who can do a lot of damage out of the slot and yards after the catch, brings a lot of speed to the table, and we'll see if he can fight for playing time in a deep receiving core early. With the second round, they also traded back in the second round. With the 18th pick in the second round, they took edge rusher Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia, a guy who slipped a bit in the draft because of health concerns, but a guy who could certainly provide a jolt to the Giants' pass rush, another big addition to that defense. With the 7th pick in the 3rd round, I believe they traded up for this guy. They took University UCF cornerback Aaron Robinson, and he'll have a shot at competing for their nickelback role. With the 11th pick in the 4th round, they took edge rusher Ellerson Smith, so yet another pass rusher. With the 12th pick in the 6th round, they took running back Gary Brightwell. And with the 17th pick in the 6th round, they took cornerback Rodarius Williams. They didn't have a 5th round pick because they had traded out to the Jets to acquire Leonard Williams, and they didn't have a 7th round pick because they had traded out to the Broncos in order to acquire Isaac Yiadom. Not a whole lot of draft capital for the Giants to work with, despite trading back in both the 1st and 2nd rounds. Giants have not signed any players to extensions, and they have not had any notable injuries as of yet. Obviously, we have Saquon Barkley coming off of the ACL, and then we got Kyle Rudolph coming off of a broken foot, but he's expected to be fine for the start of the season, so nothing really notable or serious as far as that goes. So my thoughts on the Giants offseason. I think the Giants had a very, very good offseason. In fact, I would argue they probably had one of the better offseasons of any team in the NFL. I think that a lot of teams around the league got better, but as far as attacking needs and stuff, I think the Giants did an outstanding job. It wasn't perfect by any means, but I think the Giants are pretty well positioned to do well next season, obviously depending on the play of Daniel Jones, which is the big question mark. Can Daniel Jones, can he build off that strong finish to the 2020 season? Can he cut down on turnovers, specifically fumbling, but also the interceptions? If he can, I think the Giants will be in pretty good position to make a run at winning their division. Again, the division is very winnable and very tight. The other issue I see with the Giants, and the reason why this is not a perfect offseason, is the offensive line. So as far as the O-line goes, they get Nate Solder back from opt-out, and he'll likely start at right tackle, but they downgraded at right guard by cutting Zeitler, and they're going to have Will Hernandez, who was displaced from the starting left guard spot last year, compete against Zach Fulton, neither of whom are very inspiring, so definitely a certain downgrade. So looking at the specific needs, I mentioned guard is a position of need for the Giants, and that was not really addressed. They did add Fulton, but again, not a whole lot of upside there from either Hernandez or Fulton. We kind of know what those two players are at this point in their careers, and they'll also have to hope that Shane Lemieux is a legitimate starter at left guard. Defensive line, that was definitely addressed with Leonard Williams being retained, also with Austin Johnson and Danny Shelton, so yes. Outside linebacker, they added Ojulari, they added Anderson, Odenigbo, they added some other guys there, so yes, that was obviously addressed. Cornerback, yes, with Adoree Jackson, Aaron Robinson, so again, the Giants did a really good job there. For secondary needs, I listed wide receiver, and they did attack that with Kadarius Toney and Kenny Golladay. As the Giants have, I would argue one of the, if not the deepest wide receiving groups in the NFL right now. Tight end was a secondary need, and they did address that as far as adding Kyle Rudolph and also taking a flyer on Kelvin Benjamin. And then for right tackle, they didn't add anybody else. They're going to be relying on in-house options for that, as they opted to retain Solder rather than release him. Releasing him wouldn't really help the Giants' cap situation much anyways. And they also still have Matt Pierte, who they hope can develop into a starter as well. So overall, I'm going to give the Giants an A- for their offseason, and the only thing keeping it from an A+ is the fact that their offensive line is not that great. It could potentially be better than people think if some of their younger players step up and have really good seasons, like Lemieux and, more importantly, last year's number 4 overall pick, Andrew Thomas. But yeah, so again, Giants have an outstanding team across the board, and they have depth at certain positions. But the questions are: can Daniel Jones, have that breakout year, establish himself, prove that he can be the franchise quarterback, and will the offensive line of the Giants be good enough this year? So let's close as usual by going over their projected starters entering this year's training camp. So obviously we got Daniel Jones at quarterback. Saquon Barkley, assuming he's healthy, will start at running back. Otherwise, then it will go. Otherwise, you could see Devontae Booker getting more playing time. Andrew Thomas at left tackle. This is a pretty big year for him to prove that he can be a legitimate starter at left tackle. Lemieux at left guard. Nick Gates, who also played well towards the end of the season at center. Right guard will be a true competition between Will Hernandez and Zach Fulton. Hernandez has the advantage of having a year in the system, but also having lost the starting job as well. And then right tackle will be most likely Nate Solder. However, a strong camp from Matt Pierte could possibly get him in the starting job. Solder restructured his contract, by the way, this offseason. I believe he took a pay cut, and I think his 2022 seasons might have been deleted, so he might be a free agent after this year, but I don't know for sure. I'm gonna list for starting wide receivers. Galladay will be the number 1. Sterling Shepard will be the 2, and then I'm gonna actually start Darius Slayton because he has good chemistry with Jones and has been and whatnot a couple of years together as the starting slot receiver over the likes of Dante Pettis, who showed well as a waiver claim last year during last season, and then also obviously Tony. But that's the good thing. You can never have too many wide receivers, so the Giants have depth there for sure. And then Evan Ingram will start at least initially at tight end over Kyle Rudolph. But if Ingram struggles with injuries or drops again, you could certainly see Rudolph, who has plenty of starting experience, take the starting reins. As far as their defense goes, you're going to have Leonard Williams as one of the defensive ends. I'm going to list Austin Johnson ahead of Danny Shelton because of the contract and the fact that he has a year advantage in the system. And then the other defensive lineman will be 2019 first-rounder Dexter Lawrence. As far as the pass rush goes, the Giants plan to start Lorenzo Carter, who was a guy they had a lot of hype into entering last season, but his season ended way too early with a torn Achilles. Middle linebacker Blake Martinez and then Tay Crowder. The other edge rusher spot is kind of an open competition between the likes of Ojulari and Oshani Zimenez, possibly Ryan Anderson as well, maybe some other candidates. Cornerback, James Bradbury, who was outstanding last year, returns to the cornerback 1. Adoree Jackson will be the cornerback 2. And then Aaron Robinson will compete against last year's 4th-round pick Darnay Holmes for the nickelback role. And then safety, it'll be Logan Ryan and Xavier McKinney, although Jabril Peppers should certainly see playing time as the number 3 safety as well. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next offseason recap video.